Bobby's sister could be here today, and Bobby's son, and all the grandchildren here. So glad that we're all here to just talk about Bobby and to talk about Mamaw, because they were huge figures in all of our lives. And I have always had so much fun with Mamaw. Mamaw, I entitled after she passed, I wrote, Mamaw was fun. Mm-hmm. That was the title of my writing there about her, because Mamaw was just fun. We had the best time, and I have the best stories from hanging out with Mamaw in my childhood, and she was just interesting and fun. So, on a happier note, or a note with some levity, I want to tell some of my favorite stories about Mamaw, and then we'll move on to everybody telling their stories. And I know you have some things to read from your brothers too. So, I have a sheet here just to remind me, because I don't want to forget the highlights of this. Okay, so Mamaw was fun.
Hit it, Mel.
Hit it. She was fun. She was terrified of crime. She was always reading crime novels and always watching crime TV shows. She had these glass doors on the front of her house, as we're all familiar with, and she would always say, I can just see somebody breaking that glass and a big hand reaching around there and opening that door, and I'm sitting there going,
scared of her shadow.
Yes. And I'm going, yeah, me too. Can I sleep with you tonight, Mamaw? Yeah, you can. And then we'd go to bed, and we'd get to laughing and carrying on there, and then the slats would fall out of the bed. So then we're in the bed with it tilted downward, our heads up, laughing. And the slats would totally fall out of the bed, almost every time, and it was great stuff. She was always afraid of hitchhikers too. And I remember so distinctly, it was the summer, and I think it was like 1966, 67, something like that, and I was riding in her car back from Star City to Rising, and I'm eating a banana popsicle, and first thing I remember, I stuck it out the window because I thought they'd keep it from melting, but she said, no, get that back in here, and I'll melt it faster. I said, okay. So I'm eating this banana popsicle, and we passed this hitchhiker on the road, and he has a camouflage duffel, and he's there, there on the side of the road with his thumb out. And I said, Mamaw said, oh, we would never pick up a hitchhiker. He would slit our throats. And I was licking my popsicle. Yeah. She goes, that's your cousin, Randy Hollis. And she slammed on the brakes and goes down the highway like this. And she stopped, and he opened the back door and threw his duffel, and he goes, hey, Eugene. And so we picked him up and drove on. He did not slit our throats. Jordan and I went to Europe in 2007. And, Mamaw was always afraid some man was going to talk to her, and some man was going to, hit on her or whatever. Because Linda and Mamaw came up to my house in Paragould one time, and we went to a rodeo. Well, Mamaw had to sit on the end, so no man would try to sit by her, and so she would sit on the end of the aisle. But anyway, so Jordan and I, knowing how she thought about that kind of thing, we went to Florence, and we picked out a postcard for her of the David, the statue of the David, and we sent that to Mamaw, and she was aghast when she got it. She said, it is pure pornography. I cannot believe the mailman would even deliver such a thing. Anyway, but then Mom explained to her we chose that exactly for her.
She said, why would they send me something like that? I said, who better?
Yeah.
Who better send it to me? You acted just like they thought you would.
Yeah. They got the reaction we totally wanted from it. So it was perfect. Gosh, she was, as we all know, she was such a creative person with crochet and knitting and needlework and all of that. And I spent many an hour crocheting lace around washcloths at her house, and that was a ton of fun. She had a hot temper. One time, Leslie knocked over old Ballard. Y'all know old Ballard, the stool?
Or you'll see it. I think it's still down
yeah,
there.
It was a really heavy footstool.
Like that.
Oh yeah, it's sitting right by the chair.
Yeah.
It's about a foot
Old
high.
Ballard.
Yes, old Ballard. Yes.
What has a name?
Ballard.
I don't know why that was its
I think
name.
Mr. Ballard had made that. Somebody they knew.
They named the piece of furniture.
Yeah, it's not level.
Yeah.
You're right.
Yeah.
Well, Leslie knocked it over. Leslie was real tiny.
I remember to this day. Go ahead with the
Yeah.
story.
Well, Leslie knocked over old Ballard onto Mamaw's feet. or 1 foot one time. She just got so mad, and she picked it up and threw it and hit a door and knocked a hole in that door.
That's the truth.
Scared me to death.
And then we were going home. Yeah, Leslie's like standing up in the back of the car. You know, the
Yeah.
era this was in a car seat. She's standing up in the back of the car. She goes, her feet were just laid out there.
She was studying out there. Her feet
Yeah.
was just laid out
Feet was
there.
just laid out. Yes. So she took me to see Gone with the Wind because I had the mumps in the 3rd grade and spent the week with her, and we went to the theater and saw Gone with the Wind, and you know, we just had tons and tons of fun. She loved good crime stories.
Lord.
Helter Skelter.
Oh.
Leslie and I sat on that couch in the living room and read her Helter Skelter.
Is
We
that
were
the
probably like
Charles
10.
Manson?
That's a
Yeah, it was Charles
Manson.
Manson.
Yes.
Yes.
It was
And we were looking
horrible.
at the pictures and all that. We could scarcely move off the couch after that. We were
Yes,
so
we were
She
afraid.
had that book lying around for years.
Yeah, yeah,
Helter
you probably
Skelter.
read it. It was
I
like a
thought,
coffee
table
yes,
book.
Yes.
Yeah, a coffee table
coffee
book is
table
Helter
book.
Skelter.
Helter
I was out
Yes.
in among all that mess.
Yeah, I don't
Yes.
know.
Oh, that's right. You
that's
lived
You
out
did live
there.
there then.
That's
So,
crazy.
yeah. So, one
Scared everybody to
No,
death.
you're fine, John.
one last story here about Mama that, you know, she about the rodeo. Afraid some man would talk to her or sit by her or something. And it was my understanding she wanted to be cremated after her passing,
good.
so that Silas Wilson wouldn't look at her. And
Naked,
Silas
right?
Wilson, Silas Wilson was in her class at school and worked at the funeral home. So I doubt Silas was still working at the funeral home at this point in
She didn't
time.
want Silas to see her nude body.
Yeah, I didn't want Silas to see her body. So
A lot of them were lying in bed too. In the rollaway bed, if you were lucky enough to get the rollaway
Oh,
bed,
yes.
right? Playing Riddle Riddle Marie, listen to the train go by all the way to the very end. So loud.
What's
It
Riddle
was
Riddle
like
Marie?
raining.
I
Riddle
see
Riddle
something
Marie.
you can't see.
Uh-huh.
It starts with a C, and you would
Yeah.
say chair or
Uh-huh.
coat, couch,
Yeah,
mhm.
and it
it
helps
was
you
fun.
learn to read.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mel and I.
good game.
It was a good game.
We played it all the time. too.
All
Yeah,
the time.
yeah.
Mel and I broke her out of the nursing home for Tommy's funeral. She knew everyone there, even if she hadn't seen him in 30 years by name. She used to kick my ass in Scrabble. Dollar said when her wheelchair went past the men gathered in Bowie's foyer. And she hadn't seen him in forever. And,
Yeah.
she went, what was his first name? Dollar's
Vernon.
first Vernon. She went, hey,
Vernon.
Vernon. He went, oh, hey, Eugene. He kind of went back to talking.
Then after they got over by, Leslie overheard
Yeah,
them
and
tell
then-
those men that.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
the guy was pushing her to the front, and then she was on pass, and Dollar went, yeah, she kicked my ass in Scrabble. Yeah.
She was good at word games.
She was.
She
wasn't
was good at word games.
She crocheted an entire wardrobe of Barbie clothes for me. Still have them. They're my prized possession. Swimsuits, maxi dress, short pink dress, and many others. And she let me sew Kleenex together to make wedding bells for my Barbies. And she would visit the dump for treasures. Always talking about the dump. She found an incredible pair of black and white baby Snickers that fit my toy monkey Scotty absolutely perfectly. He wore them for years. Yeah, he did. He loved them.
John, you remember Scott?
Absolutely.
He's in my closet. Yeah.
She's
Anyway.
written stories about Scott.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, we
She-
went to that reading.
Oh yeah. She could grow anything and can anything. I have
Still
some
got
of
proof
her
that all over the place.
all
out
over
there.
the place. I have her cannas in my yard now, and I tried to grow her cornflowers, but for some reason I can never get the hang of that. But we saw her with a wet cloth under her foot while she was working in the kitchen once, which was an ingenious method of floor cleaning. Remember that?
I remember that. She
Yeah.
was always scooting over.
Yeah, 'cause she was so
cloth
scooting
under.
between the
the
sink
stove and
and
the
the
sink.
stove and had that wet cloth under her foot.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mama was an avid reader and read in the nursing home until she couldn't. When we were tween and teenagers, we would sneak her books and scare ourselves to death, and we would all walk up the hill to sleep at Mammy's house. And we were walking up the hill to Mammy's house, and Mama told us not to look, but there was a naked man in the window at a house on the right side of the street, about a block before we got to Mammy's. Of course, we looked, but the shade was closed at the time. Maybe he was pulling the shade down when she caught a glimpse. We'll never know the full story. Yeah.
But
She
we
was-
were looking for the full
But we were
story.
looking. She was horribly afraid of storms and home invasions. She came to my high school musical and was delighted when Elvis gave her a scarf at the musical. Yeah.
Who was Elvis?
Barry Williams.
It's a boy in her class at
Boy in
school.
her class,
Less
yeah.
class at school. Well,
He
that
didn't
was
mean all
over.
this. Yeah. There was a damn man behind her in line at the courthouse once. The story is a little fuzzy now, but it ended with her telling him she would kick like a mule if he didn't stop flirting and back off. Yeah. Kick like a
I
mule.
think he told her if that line didn't move forward or something, he was going to pinch her leg.
He was gonna pinch her.
And she said, "You do,"
He
and I
was-
kick
he-
like a
He
mule.
had a
Kick
death
like a
wish,
mule.
didn't he?
Yeah, that
he
was
had
a death wish. Yeah.
You didn't know how dangerous it was.
So the smells, I remember from her place: cornbread, turnip greens with corn dumplings, which I have never seen since, tomatoes in the canning process, and green and earthy outside, and sounds, stuck horn on her and Pop's car as we drove through Pine Bluff, and the creaky front porch swing where I would sit for hours listening to her and our mom talk. When we left, she would stand at the end of her drive waving until we went over the tracks. Couldn't see her. That was it.
Very good.
Okay.
Good job, guys. Mel, you got what I wrote? You said you
I did, yeah.
Oh,
Did you?
here's
Leslie has
yours.
it there.
Oh, which
This
one
is
it?
yours
that me?
down there, and
That's
then
me.
here's Charles.
All right, I want to start this off is, yeah, y'all the only people on this planet call me John David.
We have so many Johns. We have
That's how
to
it
say
is.
John
But
Allen.
you've always been John David.
Yeah.
No,
I think
Nobody,
so.
I don't know why, but y'all do it. I
We
just
thought
said
it was
I
your
would-
name.
I got a lot of stories to tell as well. Since I was up to remember, we'd go to Mama's house at least twice a month for Dad to work on something for us to be spoiled by her.
Yeah.
Mama would take us to the town dump, and we would find toys such as Toss Across, which is like tic-tac-toe that you toss beanbags on, and then, but they had no beanbags for us, so she sewed us and made her own beanbags for us, and we played that till God, it's whenever we didn't wear it out. I put that in there. She was always making something fun out of other people's trash, which turned out into a treasure for us. Every time we would visit, there was always something for us lying on the beds in the back room of her house. Y'all remember that back room that's not there anymore?
Oh, heck yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You go
Yeah.
through that one room,
Yeah.
and there was always something on the bed. When we come to visit, and there was a toy or something, we would sprint in the house and run back there. But the room is gone now, like everything else. You know, they move it back around. But we would race in her house, hugging her, and we know exactly what was ours because she knew what we liked. She was extremely thoughtful and giving, always cooking up our favorite foods, taking us out to see old abandoned houses, which we thought were haunted. She'd pull up in front of the house, and it'd be dark, and she'd start telling us some ghost story,
Oh,
and just
yeah.
scaring us to death. She'd, oh yeah, there were people murdered in there, and we would just be scared to death. Oh yeah, and she'd pull up behind people, and she'd watch this, and they'd be standing by the button and lay on the horn and make them jump. Just stuff, you know, we get a big kick out of that. I didn't write that down, but that just made me think of it. And then she had a 3-foot deep pool in her carport that we would swim in because we'd go up there every summer and stay for 2 weeks. And she also had some swings hanging down from her pecan trees for us to swing on.
Yeah.
When she knew I loved, we had a fort out there they built. We called it a fort. Really, it was just 4 cross ties from the railroad with some 2x4s across, and it sat out there. And that was our fort. And we'd shimmy up, and then we'd shoot our guns at the feed mill.
How many times have you said that sentence in your life?
Oh my God! I was 6 years old, and I was shooting a .22 rifle at the feed mill.
feed mill.
And it was always an adventure. And I would mention the fort. It was, you know, basically a platform. As I got older, I still visit her as much as possible. We made screen doors together. We built the ceiling on one of her storage sheds out of the lumber from some old hotel. Do y'all remember that old hotel?
Yes.
We hauled lumber back and forth for an entire day because they were
That's that
free
house
lumber.
at Hotel Ida.
You remember that old hotel, Ida? It was across the end. That's what a lot of that White House is built out of. And last few years, I'd ask her to tell me stories about when she was young and had kids. I cherish the memories. She would always say, "Why would you travel so far to visit an old woman?" And I would tell her each time that I loved her and she was the best grandmother. I'm sorry. She was missed by me and I love her very much. Thank you. I'm sorry about that.
That's okay.
Okay. She loved you. want to do yours?
I didn't bring my packet in. Will
Oh,
you let me use yours?
Yeah, sure.
It's in here.
That was hard.
I'll do the best I can. If I ball, y'all just
When
let
it's
it go.
all right.
Let it go.
It's alright.
Because I've just laughed and done it all, and then
That's
sometimes
right.
I'll get
That's
right in the
Bobby.
middle and I say,
That's
oh, I
Bobby.
can't go any
It
further.
sure is. Yeah.
Just can't do anymore. I was trying to tell Leslie something about Bobby this morning. I said, oh, just excuse me. Everybody cried a little bit.
Yeah.
It's alright.
Yeah.
It's alright.
Well, let's see.
You want me to read Jordan's while you look at yours?
That's okay.
You
I'll
ready?
go
Okay.
ahead. Might better go ahead right
Okay.
You don't
All
need
right.
glasses like the rest of us, Patsy?
now. Do what?
You don't need glasses like the rest
Not
of us?
today. My contacts are clean.
Oh.
Okay, this one's on Mama. I said, a lot of the times I remember about Mama would be when we were walking to Mammy's house. Well, I swear, y'all don't know if I'm going further. Mammy's house was on the way to school. If school was in session, Mama would be quizzing us on spelling words, multiplication tables, or state capitals. She would have to get pretty loud if it was ginning time. We walked right by the gin, which was fun in itself, all those wagons of cotton. Going to visit Grandma and Grandpa Granderson was always referred to as going down across the river. One time there, the grown-ups were digging potatoes, and Grandpa threw some dirt on Mama, and she threw some back at him, and he took off running after her. She screamed and carried on so, y'all, you wouldn't believe it. I cried and screamed too. I told Grandpa I was telling Daddy on him. Grandpa and Mama were both muddy as could be. Grandma was very kind to me and explained it was all just in fun. It was such a surprise because Mama was not much on that kind of fun. I think that's why Grandpa did it, to stir her up. She laughed and laughed afterwards. I think she did have fun. When we were little, when I say we, I'm always referring to Bobby and me. When we were little, she was an avid reader of detective stories. We have that line, don't we? I remember a magazine named True Detective. She'd read those stories and keep herself in almost constant fear. When we went out at night without her, she locked the house up so tight we'd practically wake the neighborhood getting her up to let us in. Of course, we couldn't have a key. We had to just bang and holler. She sold tickets at the picture show, and we went with her most of the time. The owner let us in free. After the movie was over, we walked home. One night, Joe Max, our neighbor and classmate, was walking home with us. I noticed that Mama had been pretty calm for about as long as she could. I kept thinking, Mama's doing too good, Suddenly she called out, "Run!" And we took off. And Joe did too. And as we were running, he said, "Why are we running?" We told him we didn't know, but we better run. His house was only a block away from us, and so when we dropped off there at home, he went on, and I'm sure he walked, because he is always a real calm kid. I'm sure he walked that block, pondering the whole situation. God, can't you just see him? Thinking, I wonder what happened there.
He was an only child.
Yeah, and he was very grown up. He'd always just got to take care of himself. For some reason, both Mammy and Mama could stir up the ire of a bull. One time they were picking berries and noticed a bull with a number of cows. They were not real close, but decided to keep an eye on him. They saw him coming, and when they did, they saw him coming. Mama said he raised that head up and looked around, They said, God, he's got his eye on us. They took off running for the car, and I put it in quotes, they just made it. The car, get this, Mel, you remember it. I forgot to put that in there, what you called it. Mama would call it a doodle bug. Mel called it a
Henry
dude.
J. wasn't
The
it?
dude.
No, it was a Nash Rambler.
Oh, was it?
The car, a Nash Rambler, had the spare tire at the outside rear and was really slow on the takeoff. It kind of do like this. And that bull chased the Rambler and butted that spare tire several times before they got enough steam up to leave.
Oh my gosh.
And their comment was, "We won't do that again." And I guess that meant they wouldn't pick berries if a bull was in sight, because they kept picking berries at every chance they
And
got.
every bull that was there got after him.
That's true. This was not their first or last bull incident, just the only berry picking one that I could remember. She won many blue ribbons at the Cleveland County Fair, and she entered crochet pieces, note cards, canned fruit and vegetables, and produce from the garden she and Bobby had. Mama was a fine seamstress and made some really neat clothes for me. Bobby said I was her mannequin, and wow, watch out if I put on a few pounds. She was a good cook, so it was really easy to put on a few pounds. Ooh, no, you didn't put on some pounds there and didn't fit those clothes, She could draw Disney characters as well as most Disney employees. She could free-handedly make posters with sports figures, flowers, and maps. She was very creative with fabric and could applique embroidery better than most commercial machines. She and Mammy were fine quilters and together made many wonderful quilts. Mama's crochet pieces would catch the eye of many people. She taught herself to tat after she turned about 50. and she decorated note cards with her tatty, and we all remember those.
Mhm.
The whole family loved those cards. Mammy decorated cards with tatting too, so they both had real
She
pretty
made the
cards.
tatty, and I put it on the
Yeah,
edge.
I'd have had to glue it out. Mama had to do her own, but after they did the tatting, they'd have a stream of tatting, and it was slow going cutting that apart and gluing it on one day. But Ida did Mammy's for her, but Mama did her own. But I was very helpful with Mammy on that.
Stationery and Easter eggs.
Yeah.
Those that
Beautiful.
Easter
My
eggs.
best last little story, which wasn't much of a story, but John, you'll remember Hazel, don't you?
Oh yes.
Mama, Mammy, and Hazel, Mammy's sister, were quite a trio in the pickup truck and in the garden. A cousin and Raoul called them the Golden Girls. I think that pleased all three of them. That was it from Mom.
Oh.
Throw Mammy in a little bit too. I'll just go ahead and read.
You didn't tell about the bulls getting after them coming up the hill.
I know it. I just couldn't keep up with those bull stories. But somehow or other, they would stir up a bull.
But the you know where Leon Moore lived there on that hill.
That big old
I
brick
think
house
Jordan
across from
might
the
have
quick
been
end.
on top.
It came down a hill like this and went up from Jack Owens' house. And Leon had a big old Braver bull, and I'm talking about a big one.
And he was often just furious.
Yeah. And he pranced back and forth, but they had a cattle guard there, and he couldn't get out, so they thought. And they got past that cattle guard, and they heard him give a snort and look back. He got out some way, was pawing the ground, and lucky he did, because that gave them a chance to get away.
Mama said that bull, they heard him snort. It was Mammy and Mama and Mary Faye one
Yeah.
night. And they took off running. They
Eugene
said,
was ahead hollering, "Come on, Mom, come on."
Mama said Mary Faye passed her, and she said it was like Mary Faye's heels were hitting her like that. She was. And they were running, and this man named Jack Owens had a house with sort of a built-in front porch.
Yeah, go.
And they ran in on Jack Owens' front porch, and that bull was still snorting and carrying on, but someone else come along and distracted him, you know. And man, they got in a safe spot after he got distracted, took off in another direction. That should have been against the law.
SOB comes up here, he can just have me.
Well, I don't have too much to tell on Bobby, but we were always together. We were so close in age. And when we went to college the first year, people down there thought we were twins, you know, Bobby and Patsy. And they said, "Are y'all twins?" But almost all the things we have, we've got Bobby and Patsy. Like right here, there's a little picture of us after we just got over the measles. And we look like we still may have the measles. But anyway, I have a few things on Bobby. And some of them, y'all have to remember when we grew up, we didn't have television. So we were very unsophisticated, to say the least. So I said, once and only once, we agreed on a Christmas present we could share. During Christmas season, we were probably 4 or 5 years old. We were little things. We rode with Granddaddy, Mammy, Jenny, one of Mama's sisters, and Mama at Fordyce. A man came out of a store, and he was in a wheelchair. Now, y'all get the drift right off, don't you? We thought that was the greatest thing we had ever seen and would be a wonderful Christmas present for us. We got very enthused and got put back in Granddaddy's car pretty fast, too. Y'all keep in mind, these were the days before television, so we didn't know there was such a thing as a wheelchair.
Right.
But he came out of that, and he just maneuvered it so nicely, you know.
Well, didn't he have?
And Bobby said, you know, hey, you can ride in it sometime, and I can ride in it sometime. Those were the age of innocence, let me tell you. Oh, this is cute on him, kind of bad too. He would spit often, and did, but would be outside when he spit. He was just like spitting, you know. And well, the first day of school in the first grade, he was standing by Mama, and he suddenly spit on the floor. Too confined, I guess. Our teacher, Miss Cora, made him clean up the mess he had made right then and there. She was a terrible tyrant who should not have been allowed around children, animals, or old people. However, I believe she was justified in that time. But he scrubbed that floor up. Still beginning in first grade, he could hardly wait to get home one day. He had a boy in his class named Eugene. He could hardly wait to get in to tell me. He thought that was funniest thing he'd ever heard. Eugene was Mama, and the only Eugene we'd ever known. We thought it was just a girl.
And they called her that most of the time.
Didn't know that, that was really a boy's name. But he thought that was just great. He just went the whole year marveling that he had a boy named Eugene. This is kind of sad. It's kind of funny too. The first time Daddy showed up with a 4-door car, we were thrilled to death to have 4 doors on that car, but the 2 back doors wouldn't open. And we didn't care. just kept those windows rolled down, and he and I just shimmied in and out those windows, you know. And you know, John, this sounds just like him too, all his life. He would draw an imaginary line in the middle of that back seat, and I mean, I didn't dare get over that line. That's the truth. But that seemed like that old four-door car that wasn't really a four-door one. Well, it might have been one named a Willis. If there was a Willis at one time, and I think we had a blue Willis. You remember it, Randy? Or remember
I
hearing
know
it?
there was a Jeep named Willis.
I think-
so
well,
there
I think
probably
this
were
was a-
cars.
They always named their vehicles. Yeah, they always have names.
Jimmy.
Everybody has a big name.
But Daddy rolled in that car and we just loved it. It had 4 doors. When he was about 11, I was going on 10. We were at our best cousin's house down in Redland Township. I think this is between New Edinburgh and Kingsland. We loved those cousins. They could do everything. They smoked corn silks, you know, and they just
Them long
roamed. And
beans that grew on a tree.
they just did more things. And when we'd walk in the woods, James Lloyd could spot a snake, no telling how far off. And I mean, y'all just stand back, he'd say. He'd get a hold of that snake tail, pop that head just like that. Well, if we went to the woods, we wanted James Lloyd to go with us. Well, he was one of those best cousins. You've probably heard Bobby say something about
Oh yeah,
James
he
Lloyd.
said y'all had the best times
Yeah,
with
we
the cousins.
did. We loved those cousins. But anyway, this place was way out in the country, and they lived right in the middle of a farm, a big farm. And Daddy and their dad were hauling logs or something in one of those big old trucks. So only the women and kids were at home. I'll have to read those to y'all. Then that was right out in the middle of that farmland. A big tractor had just quit and wouldn't start. And it wouldn't start back up no matter what those workers did to it. So it was left where it stopped, almost in the cousin's back door. After they left, we piled on it. And we had those huge old tires, you know, those big old cleat-like things on them. And you could actually sit on them, a kid could. And we piled on it and just decorated that tractor with us, you know. And of course, Bobby and James Lloyd, you can relate to this too, John, they were at the wheel. The rest of us had to ride on the tires. But the rest of us sitting on the tires having a good time. And suddenly, with their tinkering, that tractor started, y'all.
Oh,
Smoke coming out of that big old pipe up there. And golly, we sitting there like, oh my. Well, down their mother, and she was first to get the back door and hard. Get off that thing, get off that thing. And of course, we were jumping off it and flying off it. And those men was in the field hollering, don't shut it down, don't shut it down. But James and Bobby was tinkering with it, choking it, and doing things to it. And I mean, that dude started up. So here they came. Those farm hands heard it and started running for the tractor and yelling, don't shut it down, don't shut it down. And Mom and Dad were yelling at us to get away from that tractor as fast as we could, and we were jumping. Lucky for us, it didn't roll, but we rolled with scared, nervous laughter. It like scared the crap out of us. We were so scared. And the tractor rolled off of those drivers, those guys. They jumped right off. And of course, we told that for years to come. When we were in the 7th and 8th grade, a friend, I love this story. When we were in the 7th and 8th grade, a friend came home from school with me to wait for something at the ball game or something at school, and she just came to stay there. She lived out in the country, and she came to wait with me till it started. She and I were sitting on the front porch just laughing and talking. There was a big old grass-covered ditch-like thing in our house. It was big. It kind of went down like that, and in pretty weather, you could just walk down it and walk on home. We had some slabs of lumber across it. If it's raining, you had to walk on this little bridge. But this was dry time. I've got a good description of this on there. I want to read it. There was a big grass-covered ditch in front of our house, and we walked through it if it wasn't raining. Here comes old Bob, riding his bike home from Daddy's shop or wherever he had been, and he saw us. And he made that bright bike practically take wings, pedals churning, went right into that big ditch. And started up the other side, and his front wheel folded over like a taco. It was the funniest thing. He didn't get hurt, but of course he was furious. Can't y'all just see that? He was just furious. And he got out and started tinkering and cussing and carrying on, you know. And Carolyn was trying to be sure not to laugh, but I was just rolling. I got a few punches on the arm, too. But the problem, he'd always get mad at someone punching me on the arm. But that taco wheel was hilarious. That just had to be the funniest thing I'd seen. With a lot of tinkering and hammering, he eventually got that wheel up and going. This is a good story, too, I think. We were coming home late one afternoon and heard a terrible croaking sound. It was terrible. I can just remember that to this day. Bobby was the first to see what it was, a water moccasin with a big bullfrog in its mouth. And before nobody said anything, it was like, oh, what are we going to do or anything? He had jumped down and picked up a big old rock and threw that thing, hit that snake right on the head, and that frog went, phew. and took off. That was a sight, and he was our hero for days. And we told that story over and over. I remember telling Grandma and
One
Grandpa
more
about it.
happy frog.
And you know, it probably died. It had it in its mouth, but it had it like back end, you know. And it was croaking and croaking. But that was hilarious. If he'd have stood there and poised and tried to hit the head, he probably never would have made it. But he just flung that rock and hit that snake, and it relaxed it up, and I mean that frog went. It kind of like made an arc, you know. So next time we went down across the river, we had to tell that too. But we like going down across the river. He and I always wanted a Christmas tree. Always. We had to have a Christmas tree. Daddy had loped one along the county road sometime when he was road grading or something, and we'd go out and cut it later. One year, Mama said, no Christmas tree. We're not having a Christmas tree this year. I think we were already in grades 9 and 10. When school turned out for the holidays, Bobby's class sponsor, who was also my home ec teacher, gave us the tree from the home ec building. She said, y'all want this tree? I hate to throw it away. We said, yeah, we did. It was a big one. So Bobby took the trunk, and I took the top, and we carried that thing home right down the sidewalk of Main Street. Only thing God said to us was, hey, you two, hope you have a Merry Christmas. Once he had a girlfriend named Jean. Jean's mother worked out of town during the week, and I went to Jean's house pretty often too. She had a real neat grandmother, and she didn't care if we laughed and played records. She just would, if it got bedtime, Miss Maddox, she'd go in there and just go to bed. Jean, y'all, you know, lock things up later, you know, all this, that, and the other. But her name was Miss Maddox, and we played records, laughed loudly, and Jean's cousin dropped in. Sometimes it was George Ida, and he taught me how to dance. I guess Gene and Bobby already knew how, but he said, he was like us, John. He said everybody needs to know how to dance. So he just did kind of a simple thing, and it got fun. They always had good records. Usually around 9 o'clock, we'd walk on right down the middle of the street, and I was not scared. We could run pretty fast, and Bobby could cuss and act tough. Fortunately, we were never tested, though. It was a different time then, y'all remember that. Bobby always made the honor roll at school. And was a real good trombone player in the high school band. So he was pretty all around. So that's my story.
They're good stories.
So, did you want to read Jordan's? Well, Leslie, you started to read someone else's, didn't you?
Oh, Mel, did you want to read Jordan's? Or you got
Sure,
Jordan's?
I've got
Go
Jordan's
ahead.
right here. I'll read hers.
Before she
This
starts,
one's gonna be
I
about
was about
Mama.
George. You was talking about George Walker.
That's her
He
daughter,
can't even
Jordan.
do anything now. Has to have his food mashed up.
Oh, he was the neatest thing. He said, now
And
Patsy used to do
and
3
she just
steps. It was
found
like
out-
step, 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 step.
She found out she's got cancer real bad, so she's in the same place with him there.
Oh,
Trinity
goodness.
Village.
It's,
So I forget that.
yeah, and I wanted to ask you before I forget too, what happened to Patsy's face?
They would always, Olivia especially would say, you know, what are their names? Is that Mickey and Minnie? And Mama and Mammy. Yeah, she goes, are they Mickey and Minnie? And are they twins?
Olivia was quite
confused
little.
about
Yeah,
that
she was
too.
little when she
Frickin'
said
Fred,
that.
really.
Yeah. but so Jordan writes, Mama and Mammy, Mickey and Minnie. For the vast majority of my childhood, I don't remember seeing one without the other, and always thought of them like the Disney cartoon. While I didn't see them often, I would always look forward to their visits to Monticello when we were there. They always brought the coolest treats, candy, quilts, note cards, handmade dolls or snowflakes, you name it. Whatever it was typically something I'd never seen before and was usually told to wash my hands before touching. I always looked at them like a bit of a legend. Who gets chased by bulls and has the opportunity to get the broom after someone that often? My memories of Mama and Mammy are limited, but their impact on my life is not. They raised my grandmother and mother into strong, amazing women, and I'm already passing that on to my own daughter. Her middle name is Pennington, and her room hangs a cross that Mammy tatted, and on her bed a cat doll and a rabbit doll that Mama sewed. They have a piece of a quilt that Mammy and her mother-in-law, Grandma Sarah Frances Pennington, made. The older I get, the more I appreciate the bond they all shared. I hope Caroline wants to hang out with me until I'm 96.
Oh,
So that was
that's good.
Good.
John. John has some from Joel and Charles.
Yeah, about me read Charles's. Where's that? Where'd I put that?
Okay.
It's right there.
I agree with Charles on a lot of this because he had put on there a lot of things I didn't want to repeat. Tribute to Mamaw. This is 3 pages. Charles, he's the writer.
It's Charles.
It is with sadness and nostalgia, mostly nostalgia, that I think about my late grandmother, whom all the grandkids and great-grandkids called Mamaw, and my dad and nearly everyone else in the family called her by her middle name, Eugene. She was 96 years old when she passed. I talked to her on her birthday in February for the last time. I wish I had called more and could have visited more in the past several years. Mamaw is a figure that loomed large in my life, well beyond my childhood years. I have regaled my friends and family with stories of our adventures living with her when we were kids, and with my grandfather we called Pop when he was still alive. We visited much more often than that, but there was a time period where we stayed for a few weeks each summer without Mom and Dad, and those times helped shape my comprehension of the world and other people, that it and they are mostly funny or crazy or both. That working hard went hand in hand with giving every place and everyone a nickname, making up funny stories and characters, playing Riddle Marie in bed at night, blowing up cans with firecrackers, catching fish with a cane pole, shooting stray dogs with rat shot.
Oh,
Pop would take the 22 and put the rat shot, and he goes, "Watch that dog's getting ready to squat," and he would
Oh my
pow and shoot it right
God.
in his, and that dog would run off hollering.
Oh my
And we just got the biggest kick out of it. We loved that. Calling out the names of the various railroad lines by the symbols on the sides of the passing train cars, climbing the chinaberry tree and shooting chinaberries with our slingshots, playing in the dirt under the barns, her little houses behind her house that were full of all kinds of crazy stuff, like a boot with a bullet hole in it. You were talking about that on the way here.
We were talking about
That's what-
that
Yeah,
yesterday.
I said they saw that.
Yeah,
That
I found
Really?
Yeah, the boot's still there.
Yeah, I remember that distinctly.
What happened?
He shot his gun and almost blew his toes off.
It went in between
Does
his big
Papa
toe
do
and
that?
toe next to
it.
him.
Alan said,
Pop
that
did.
looks like a
Yeah.
bullet hole. And I said, that it is, and here's where it came out.
He was hunting, climbed a fence.
Oh my gosh.
And eating tons of peas, fried potatoes, biscuit and gravy, chicken and dumplings, coconut, peach, and carob nut pies, and homemade spaghetti and meatballs a la Raisin, and drinking pot liquor. I'll get that guy. An important lesson I learned was about love. Mama loved us unconditionally, with all her heart. Everyone needs that, and more of it. It is a dependable foundation that makes going out into the world and making your way possible, building your own family and life possible, and accepting hardships easier. Most importantly, if I think back, it makes it natural to become a shelter in the storm for other people. I heard her say more than once, "This too shall pass." You'd think this quote was right out of the Bible, as I did at the time, but it's a Persian saying. I'm not sure if she knew that fact at the time, but it wouldn't surprise me if she did. Another thing I learned from her was I didn't have to obediently or blindly accept church teaching. She would sometimes quote Pop after he died. "Beware those Bible-toting, scripture-quoting sons of bitches." Sorry, Cole. She was a natural at cussing. Yeah, she could rip one out. I believe how she talked to us was an expression of her love for us. It wasn't an authority figure to a lowly child, but funny and direct, like we were equals. Although when she got mad, she really got mad and loud. But those times were short-lived, like those passing summer storms that would remind Pop of some improbable tornado story where entire bulldozers and road graders and dragliners were lifted into the sky. Mama lived a simple life. She didn't need much, and most of what she needed she grew or made herself. She was a master at finding cast-off things and repurposing them. She grew up in the Great Depression, and I think this and many other thrifty things she did were simply habits she learned and just kept on doing, like her sisters and her mother. She made dresses, afghans, flower arrangements, lace, painted wood figures cut out by her sister, that's you, Ida. She made hats, tomato juice and sauce, pickles, squash dressing, peanut brittle, collard greens, cornbread, and on and on. There are probably more creations I don't even know about. She picked buckets of blackberries and elderberries for jam and jelly. She shelled pecans and sold them in little plastic bags. What she didn't use in carob nut pies, the crowning glory in my mind was the garden, which was the centerpiece to her and her sisters, aunts, and mother's annual conquest of the Cleveland County Fair. I have pictures of piles of blue ribbons on her piano and on her coffee table. I believe Mama entered every possible event except livestock. And she won, which meant she won money. It was still and is a matter of pride to me how much she won. In 2005, I finally started my own garden with Ben. That's his son. In 2007, we entered tomato juice, cherry tomatoes, blueberry, and peach jam, an arrangement Lori put together of Ben's herbs. We won 2 blueberries. That's about Charles and them. Hang on a second. A far cry from Mamaw's success, but it was a start. More importantly, every year we've had tomatoes, and every which bite takes me back to those summers at her house. Mamaw provided me with one of the greatest days of my life when I caught a big catfish with a cane pole in her Aunt Hazel's pond. Mamaw would take my brothers and me there to fish at least once per trip. We would sit next to the water in a lawn chair and bait hooks and remove and return fish to the pond, except Joel didn't want any of his fish thrown back. So we usually come home with a mess of tiny fish that looked like little leaves on a stringer. Mamaw would clean them and cook them anyway. I had learned from experience that if a big fish got on the line, not to lift up and break the pole, but to run backwards, dragging the fish on shore. When I pulled that fish out of water, it spit out the hook. In that instant, Mamaw yelled, "Lord, what a fish!" and jumped out of her chair, grabbed it before it could flop back in the pond, and threw it arcing through the air, back over the hill and into the pasture. I will never forget how that black fish looked against the blue sky. When we got back to her house, the neighbors across the street acted like I was a hero. You remember that bunch across the street?
Yep, I sure did.
I got the picture they still took of him. They took my picture holding that fish with their Polaroid camera and gave us all of us copies. Mamaw told me they kept one for themselves on top of their TV set.
Yeah, you remember those Edwards across
Yes.
the
Oh,
street?
yeah. I remember she fell in the ditch and they had to have a truck pull her out.
Yes. And she wiped the mud on the dog.
Yeah, she was so muddy you thought she swam in a mud pond. I wish I could say thank you to Mamaw right now. I have too many more memories to fully recount them all. I remember lying on the floor in her living room listening to Jerry Clower, Into the Ring of Fire by Johnny Cash, and seeing the whole Cash family at the football field at the Bicentennial, to be followed by an enormous meal. I remember her asking, "You didn't like the corn?" after I just ate a gallon, but there was some left. I remember how she would cry every time my parents got her a present, and how when we finally arrived at her house from wherever we lived, she would always have food on the stove and presents for us like bows and arrows or tops or squirt guns or fireworks. I remember trying to drink instant coffee at her kitchen table while sitting there, her suddenly shouting, "Look out!" and then yanking a hot cast iron pan out of the oven, slamming it upside down on the kitchen table and knock out the pound of cornbread, and slinging the pan into the old enameled metal sink. I remember fried apple pies, black-eyed peas, jelly, and all the food she would pack for us to take, no matter where we were headed next. I remember her loud laughter every time she recounted John running into the yard to grab his toys as a thunderstorm approached, lightning flashing the whole time, looking anxiously up the sky. Her favorite part was when he got back in and said, "Mamaw, it was that stroking kind." It was coming down hard. I was scared to death. One of my most cherished memories is of her standing in the road when we would leave her house. You just recounted that. Waving at us the whole time. We drove up and over the hill. I also vividly remember recording her and all the adults gossiping with a tape recorder I got for Christmas. Mammy said to Pop, who was lying on the couch, "Louis, you don't look so good." He died a short while later. I was 11. Since then, this story was recounted in my family numerous times, even by Mamaw, and always with a sense of humor, as though Mamaw had it some kind of premonition. It's sad but funny at the same time, because as far as I can recall, mostly funny is how Mamaw saw the world. I try and impart that kind of love and wisdom to my family, and I'll keep trying. That was a good writer.
Yeah, he is.
Yeah.
Whew.
Wow.
That was a long one, wasn't
It was long.
You had to
And
keep on
smart.
Martin.
He's a different bird.
That's what Bobby said.
John, a few words that you can read before I try to be brief. Thank you, Bob, for your wisdom and your friendship and all the help and advice you gave me over the years. A true friendship is the sharing of special moments. I will never forget our travels and events that we shared together with so many discussions on so many topics from sports, education, history, and God. I was indeed very fortunate to meet and work with a kind, wise, great friend that you became to me. Your friend always, Mr. Martin, and he put Ron in parentheses. All right, stop recording for a second. And Dad by Joel Granderson. It's hard to believe or maybe even to accept that both Mama and Dad have crossed over to heaven, a real place where through faith in Jesus Christ and his shed blood for our sins, interest and citizenship is given to us by his magnificent grace. I have a lot of memories, so I first decided to narrow it down. First, I would like to say that I look forward to seeing Dad and Mama on the other side in heaven, because they, as well as I, have received Lord Jesus Christ as personal Lord and Savior. This is my consolation, comfort, and abiding hope. ... I will see them again in the glorious place, and they are waiting for me there and for all of us who have or will receive Jesus Christ as Savior and Lord. Meanwhile, I want to send an extra thank you to everyone who has pitched in to help in all the special ways that made a huge difference. I am truly grateful for my dad and grandmother and all that they have meant to me in my life. I have spent many summers growing up where my brothers and I visited her and Mammy. We fished, worked in the gardens, ate great food, and had all kinds of kid adventures. There were always projects to do, but many of them seemed fun to me. And she always expressed great appreciation when you helped out and did a good job. An example of a project might be climbing on her house and sweeping off limbs and leaves. Later, she allowed me to paint the outside of her house. Adventures might include exploring the feed mill, climbing on a parked boxcar, riding a bike, making homemade ice cream, picking strawberries from the backyard, and climbing trees. Watching and hearing the trains pass by happened day and night and still does. Mama also came to visit us at our house where she helped cook. This was usually during the holidays, and we always had a great time. We spent New Year's Eve together one year, and I can't remember if we stayed awake till midnight. Later on, I came to visit her by myself. We did projects around the house and yard, and we went to Hazel's farm to do some gardening. We stayed at Mammy's house a lot, and I got to know other relatives and enjoy their company. She taught me how to harvest vegetables, and I watched her do a lot of canning, cooking, and freezing when we got home. It would be extremely hot in her kitchen, but she would stay at it until she finished. Mama worked hard, but she knew how to relax too. We watched game shows, sitcoms, and westerns together. When it came time for her stories, I would go down and do my own thing. When I became a Christian in 1982, Mama supported me in her own way. She allowed me to pray at the table and accepted me for who I was. We had great talks and got along fabulously. She thought I might become a preacher one day. In the mid-1990s, a disagreement took place and we never talked about. However, later, she knew of my life, my family, my children, and a lot of the goings-on. I never stopped loving her, and I do not believe she stopped loving me. I cherish all the great times we had together. My dad was the single most important mentor, he just switched gears, confident in my life. Confidant. We lived through countless events, journeys, and jobs together. Though we may share many disagreements, in the final years he accepted me and fully supported me in every way possible. He was and is simply irreplaceable. Among so many things, he taught me to work hard, be skillful and excellent, be frugal and save, to think things out, to have a good plan, and to be creative, confident, consistent, honest, and endure difficult circumstances and people. He helped me develop multiple skills to prepare for any eventuality as best as I could. Dad was very skilled at many things, and his greatest asset was using his skills to help people. He helped a lot of people, even the thankless ones. I am grateful that he taught me how to do so many things, to work with my hands, and to be versatile. He thought it was also okay to be intelligent and to know what was going on in the world. Spiritual matters were not left out, and we agreed on the Bible, prayer, and salvation through Jesus Christ. He is very insightful, and we thoroughly enjoyed our conversations till the day before he went to the doctor. We were making plans we were going to meet over the Christmas break. I now look forward to seeing him and Mama again on the heaven shores or in the clouds when Jesus returns. God's richest blessings to all. There's Jules. As a kid, in the backyard, Dad was always, making something out of nothing. And we had a pool in our backyard, a little 3-foot, cheap pool. But he made a filter and everything for it, like a real swimming pool.
Really?
And we
Wow.
would swim in it all the time. It was clear as a bell. Joel would swim in it naked because he was only about a year and a half old. But, he made us that, and he carved me a wooden sword. One thing I remember the most is my first day, first grade. Dad took me to school, and I was scared to death. And I remember we had no air conditioning. I sat by the fan, because there was one fan in the room, it was in the back room, so I sat by it so I could be cool. And I was sitting there scared, and I looked over the door, and he was standing there just staring at me at the door.
Oh.
And then I remember he got burned by the Buick. Y'all remember that?
Yes.
I remember that.
I remember going to the hospital.
And I remember going to the
Yeah,
hospital.
yeah.
We stayed with you, Ida, a lot during that 'cause it was in Pine Bluff. He was in the hospital. And I remember being in the oxygen tent thinking, my dad's going to die, and it was terrible. But I remember that.
What did he do?
What he did was the car overheated. He opened the hood up, and then the radiator hose blew up, and it scalded him. And my mother told me that on the way to the hospital, he's like, I just need some aspirin. And she said the skin was just falling off of him. And he kept patting her on the leg saying, well, everything's going to be fine. It's going to be fine. She said the car was just smoking, and she was flooring it trying to get to the hospital. There was no cell phones, so you couldn't. But there's kind of a crazy, Dad had a horrible temper. I don't think people, that. He had a temper. We got out, we had a 2-bedroom house in Mountain Home, and behind the house was a creek, and when it would rain, it would flood the creek, and then it got real shallow, and it would turn to mud. And me and Charles and Joel got out there. We were wrestling around the mud, and it's about 3 feet of mud, and we got muddy, muddy as hell. And we came out, and we were getting ready to go, we came out the front door, and he came out the front door, and all you could see was the whites of our eyes. We just wrestling in the mud. He started screaming at us and beating us with the broom as he squirted us with the garden hose to wash us off. Oh man, he was cussing us a blue streak, and I thought he was very talented. Also, he was a house builder and a designer. And my mom had a fit. Joel was 6, I was 8, and Charles was about 11 or so, or 12. And we were up on the roof of a house, nailing on the roof, and she couldn't believe he had kids up on the roof of the house. He'd chalk the line and say, start nailing down the line, 1 foot every nail, and we would just go down there, and that was the best times for us. And I didn't really see my dad a whole lot as a teenager. I'd go visit him in Oklahoma. He'd always buy me a crappy car, I think because he wanted to work on it. And I was headed to Oklahoma one night to go visit him, and the clutch went out on my car. When your clutch goes out, the car still revs up and it just stops. And I walked along for a couple of hours in the dark down this road, and I was walking down the middle of the road, and I was frightened of snakes because they would come out on the road to warm up at night, and it was pitch black. And these people pulled up out of nowhere, and they were coming from some religious thing, and they said, you want a ride? And I wouldn't have given me a ride, and because I had long hair and I was a bad seed.
What your cousin Randy Hollis.
And they gave me a ride to town, and Dad fixed my car, rebuilt the clutch, and acted like it was my fault that it burned up. But, I said, how's it my fault? I don't ride the clutch. And he was like, be more careful of that damn clutch. But he rebuilt it. It was rebuilt by noon the next morning, believe it or not. But we got real close when I was 23. I moved to Memphis, and then it wasn't working out. He lived right outside Memphis in Mississippi. So he said, you just come on to the house when you want. And I was going to apply for a job to be an irrigator at some company in Memphis. But I remember waking up in the morning, and it was so strange. He was sitting on the bed staring at me. I said, what the hell are you doing? And he goes, I'm just staring at you. And he was looking at me. He hadn't seen me in a long time. And I thought that was something. And then we played cards every day. And he had a dry sense of humor.
It was very sarcastic.
Very sarcastic. And I taught him this card game called Last Card. It's kind of like Crazy Eights and Uno, but you can play with regular cards. I said, it's called Last Card. And he goes, let's change the name of that. That's boring. He goes, let's call it Quattro. And I said, what the hell's Quattro? And he goes, that's Swahili for last card. So I got back to college, and I go, we're going to play Quattro. And I go, you have to yell out Quattro when you get down to your last card. And they say, Quattro means 4. Because I never took it. I felt like a fool. So I call him up on the phone. I said, what the hell? Quattro means 4. And he goes, I figured you knew that. And he taught me into moving Texas. And I grew up hating Texas. I hated Texas my entire life. We had to hate Texas. But he talked me into moving down into Texas, and we had a blast when I got to Texas. We went to happy hour. Because he was only my age when I moved there, so he was young. Mm-hmm. We'd go to happy hour and we'd have fun. We'd have lunches every Friday because I had an hour and a half off. And we'd meet at a Mexican restaurant and eat lunch and talk. And he'd come by my school sometimes. And one time he was at my school, and it was a work day, and I had a classroom. And the principal, he was an idiot. He came on the announcement. He goes, teachers, change out your classroom even if you got to move your poster over 1 inch. And my dad's like, is that man some sort of idiot? And we just laughed and made fun of him. And then we started on a remodeling business. He wanted me to learn how to be a carpenter. And he named it Keystone Construction. He explained to me what a keystone was. That's the first block on a building that you build. And we were redoing this girl's entire house. And we'd been there for about a month. And we were smashing out walls and everything. She didn't live there. And we were throwing stuff in the floor, and I was going to load up a wheelbarrow, take it out to the dumpster. I said, I'm going to take this out to the dumpster. And he stood over there by the window. He had a crowbar in his hand, and I saw something on the floor that I left on the floor, and I bent down and swung that crowbar like this, and smacked me in the head and knocked me into the bathtub. And I said, what the hell? He goes, I thought you were outside already. And I was like, no, but it knocked me. It probably gave me a concussion. Because I didn't mean to hit you. And I go, yeah, I'm sure you didn't. But we remodeled the entire house, and knowing Dad, he did more than he was supposed to do. He climbed up, they had an old chimney that they took out on the wall, but he found it somehow in the attic, and he took it out too, and we did way more than we got paid for. But, and another thing, people call me MacGyver because I can fix things, but my dad was the real MacGyver, and that's where I learned it from. You remember that old Volkswagen Rabbit? Anybody remember that? He had the diesel.
I do.
I drove it over his house, and the fuse burned out on it. And I go, Dad, the fuse is burned out. And he looked in and he goes, cut open a Coors Light beer can, slid it in there where the fuse was, and we sold the car in for another 4 or 5 years till we knew with the Coors Light beer can as a fuse. He goes, it's a conductor. And so yeah, he did that. And then I go camping out by his house a lot, and he'd come out no matter what and play cards. Here's where his sense of humor would come in. And I was very, environmental. So he goes, my car needs a little bit of oil. And he gets out there and he pours oil in it. And we're out in the woods. He takes the oil can and just tosses it out in the woods.
Oh.
And I'm looking at him like, what? And he just starts laughing because he knew I was going to say something. He goes, I'm just messing with you. And he went and picked it up. But he would do things like that. And we'd play cards out there and have a great time. And one of his best times, he liked to go deep sea fishing. And
I
me,
remember him like it.
he loved that, and I hated it because it made me seasick. But I'd go for him. But Charles, Joel, and I went with him. We had a big sea, trip. And Joel, on the way there, said, Joel, you better take some Dramamine. You better take. And Joel's hard-headed, and he's like, I'm not taking that. I'm a man. I took the Dramamine, slept till the boat stopped, and I got out, and Joel was seasick by that time. And so we're up there, and we're fishing away, and Joel's inside getting sick. And Joel, they give you a big bag to throw your fish in with ice. And Dad goes, well, we can use Joel's bag as our beer trash can. And so we're throwing all our trash in Joel's bag, and their chicken bones and everything. We're just trashing, and Joel finally got up a couple hours into the fishing. He goes, my bag's a trash can. We just laughed. Oh, he loved that. We used his bag as a trash can. Dad got a big kick out of that. And then when I went to take my irrigation test for my irrigation license, Dad wanted to take it with me in the class. And so I knew more than the teacher, and he got a kick out of it because I've been doing it forever. And he got a little upset that I scored higher than him on the test. I said, Dad, I got a 99 on that test. I said, you got a 95. And he was like, oh, there's some cheating going on. He was joking around. But, he was a great storyteller. Actually, the last time I was in Rising, he took me all over Rising and told me tons of story about when that guy blew up that 50-gallon can. Did you know anything about it? It shot up in the air about 100 feet over there by the high school.
I don't think I do.
He told me about one uncle of y'all's that went down Main Street drunk on a mule, and his feet were dragging the ground the whole time. Did you know that story? He had all sorts of stories. Shootouts.
He could remember so many more things about our Grandersons. He could even remember a lot more about Grandma and Grandpa than I could.
Oh, he told me a lot of stories about the shooting on Main Street when
We
Mama
all
worked at the
remember that.
picture show.
The Morrison, that
He said,
He said he didn't have on a gun, but he had his pants on,
and
so he had a gun.
it was Reed's and Morrison.
yeah, he told me all sorts of stories. He took me all over the whole town and told me different stories. And then we went out to the cemetery last year, and he went by all the gravestones and told me stories about almost everybody out there that he could remember, which I loved it. And then we went down to the Saline River bottoms, and we almost got stuck. And I was like, we're in that little car, so why didn't we bring the truck? Oh, this little car can handle it. And
He wanted to do that little car for everything.
he did. We went all over the river bottoms, and we had a great time. And he was always good for advice. I called him every week for advice. And when I bought a motorcycle, Dad was like, next 6 months later, he had a motorcycle. And I said, Dad, you don't even know how to ride a motorcycle. But he had it, and we rode around on the motorcycle, and then he never rode it again. But that was a story about my dad, and he was great, and I miss him.
He had an old car. He had the only one around there that had an old car because he could make one out of wire. And he and Don would get in the back, and Bobby would hide in the front where nobody could see him. And they'd be going down Main Street, and Don's telling us, say a little here, a little there, and everybody thought, here's a car going down the road by itself. This crazy stuff they do all the time.
While we were talking, you were gonna say something, weren't you?
Yes, I was going to say. Well, this is Olivia, and she is my daughter, so she's representing the great grandchildren.
Oh, Olivia, I hadn't seen you in years.
I know.
That's my wife Nicole, and that's my son.
Nice to meet you guys.
Cole.
And so this is the great
She's one of
grandchildren,
your
and she is
cousins.
the mother of the great grandson.
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 Oh, the first son on that side.
That's
Like,
right.
you're the hero, heroine.
That's right.
So we're glad you could get over
And
here.
the older you get, the greater you get, see?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
There were
Great,
so many
great,
stories,
great,
and, you know, as you all were telling things, it would bring something else to mind about the things, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't put this in writing because it wasn't really a good thing, but yet it's kind of funny too. Bobby and I, we lived in a little house at the end of the overpass, and then in the same yard was, that's why I know all that, was the big house that belonged to the landlord, and he had apartments in his big house too. And I think this was a railroad man that come in there and with his family. He had a little boy and a little girl. They were named Doxy Joanne. They called her both named Doxy Joanne. And Danny was the brother. And they would come over to our yard to play. We played a lot with them, and they were real likable. But we were all biters. Like, and for some reason, you know, when you got mad at your little playmate, you bit him. And they bit, you know. And Bobby was especially a biter, right in the dead center of the back.
Ooh.
And anyway, Danny apparently had bit him back, and it really hurt. And it scared Danny too that he had done so much damage, he thought, and he took off running home. Well, Bobby's standing there hollering, just hollering, "Get him, Patsy!" I overtook him before he could get home. He said,
You did get him?
I got him. And he went home just crying like crazy. Mama said, their mother's gonna come over here. But she didn't. I guess she knew that they had a bit too, you know.
But he got bit twice.
But it was crying and hurt. "Get him, Patsy." She just couldn't make it. Oh, dear. You could probably just hear him saying that.
Well, we've made a picture book of some of the old pictures that we could find of Mama and of Bobby, and of course, so many of Bobby have Mom in them too.
It was like this.
Yeah,
When we had pictures, we were together.
we're twins practically. So anyway, we have one for each of y'all. So
Oh, that's
and
really
then we
nice.
have a copy of the writings here too. So
Wow.
We have
Sure.
a copy.
Thank God for Mel.
Really?
Yeah.
We gotta
I mean,
ask
what
Joel
the
to
heck?
give. Ask John to give Joel and
Sure.
Charles.
yes, or we can send them, or if you want
I
to
can
send
see
them,
Joel. Yeah, I
you'll
see Joel.
still see Joel. Okay,
And I can
we
get Charles his. I
Okay.
gotta send him some stuff.
Okay,
You have
sure,
some other
we'll do
things to
that.
give him, I think, don't you?
Yeah,
That old
so-
clock that
Uh-huh.
Dad found in that house.
Yeah,
That,
and his
you know,
picture, maybe.
and his picture.
Yeah.
But Val fixed this out. It's sort of an album,
That's so
but
nice.
it's really,
Yeah.
it's